Hitler's dead. The Reich is burning. But what did his own generals whisper in those final hours? 3 officers, 3 confessions, 1 shocking truth. The first general made a statement that changed everything historians thought they knew. The second revealed a secret that had been buried for decades. And the third? His words were so disturbing they were classified for years. What they said next will shake you. The bunker's final hours. April 30th, 1945. Deep underground in Berlin, Hitler pulls the trigger. The man who controlled millions is now just a body on a couch. But here's what nobody tells you. His top officers were right outside that door. They heard everything. They knew everything. And within hours, they started talking. What they said wasn't grief, it wasn't shock. It was something far more chilling. These men had served Hitler for years. They'd followed his orders without question. They'd watched him drag Germany into total destruction. But now the mask could finally come off. The first officer to speak was General Hans Krebs. He was Hitler's last chief of staff, his final military advisor, the man who'd been by his side until the very end. And what Krebs said in those first moments changed everything. But before we get to his words, you need to understand something important. The man closest to Hitler. General Krebs wasn't just any officer. He was the last person to see Hitler alive. Think about that for a second. While Berlin burned above them, while Russian soldiers closed in from every direction, Krebs stayed loyal. He could have fled. He could have surrendered, but he didn't. This was a man who believed in the cause, or at least that's what everyone thought. Hours after Hitler's death, Krebs did something unexpected. He picked up a phone and called the Soviet command. Yes, you heard that right. He called the enemy. He wanted to negotiate. He wanted to make a deal. And during that call, he said something about Hitler that shocked the Russian generals on the other end. Krebs told them Hitler was dead. But it wasn't how he said it. It was what he said. He didn't mourn. He didn't defend. Instead, he tried to use Hitler's death as a bargaining chip. The cold truth. The Führer is dead. Now we can talk. Those were essentially Krebs' words. Not, our leader has fallen. Not, Germany mourns. Just, now we can talk. It was as if Hitler's death had removed an obstacle, like a weight had been lifted. The Soviet generals were stunned. They'd expected denial, maybe anger, but this was something else entirely. Krebs spoke about Hitler like he was discussing a failed business deal. But here's where it gets darker. Within 24 hours, Krebs would be dead too. He took his own life rather than face capture. Some say it was loyalty. Others say it was guilt. But there's a third possibility nobody talks about. Maybe Krebs knew too much. Maybe he'd seen things in that bunker that couldn't become public. And maybe his final words hinted at secrets that died with him. But he wasn't the only one talking. The general who broke his silence. General Alfred Jodl was different. He was Hitler's chief of operations, a strategic mind master, one of the most powerful men in the German military. And unlike Krebs, Jodl survived. He was captured by Allied forces just days after the war ended. For weeks he refused to talk about Hitler. He wouldn't answer questions. He wouldn't give details. He sat in silence, staring at walls. But then something changed. During his interrogation at Nuremberg, They asked him one simple question. Did you know Hitler was insane? The room went quiet. Everyone waited. Jodl leaned forward. He looked directly at his interrogators, and for the first time, he spoke freely. "We all knew," he said. "For years, we all knew." Those 5 words sent shockwaves through the courtroom. This wasn't some low-level soldier. This was Hitler's top general, his right-hand man in military planning. And he just admitted they'd followed a madman knowingly.
The confession that changed history. Jodl didn't stop there. He told them about the meetings, the rants, the impossible orders. He described how Hitler would scream for hours, demanding attacks that made no sense. He ordered armies that didn't exist to attack positions we'd already lost, Jodl said. Officers would nod, they'd salute, they'd say, "Yes, my Führer," and then they'd walk out and do something completely different. By 1945, the entire command structure was built on lies. Generals were lying to Hitler, Hitler was lying to himself, and everyone knew it. But here's the part that still haunts historians. Jodl was asked, "Why didn't you stop him?" His answer was chilling. Because we were already too far gone. Stopping him meant admitting everything we'd done was wrong. Think about that logic. They kept following orders not out of belief, but out of fear of facing the truth. But there was one more officer whose words cut even deeper. The architect of surrender. General Wilhelm Keitel was known as Hitler's yes man. He never questioned orders. He never pushed back. If Hitler said jump, Keitel asked how high. For years, he was considered the most loyal officer in the Wehrmacht. But after Hitler's death, a different man emerged. When Keitel was captured, American officers expected defiance. They expected Nazi salutes and declarations of loyalty. Instead, they got something nobody anticipated. Keitel broke down. Not with tears, but with words. He started talking immediately, and he couldn't stop. He told them about the last days in the bunker, about how Hitler had completely lost touch with reality, about orders being given to armies that had been destroyed weeks earlier. He was moving phantom divisions on a map, Keitel said. Millions of men who existed only in his mind. But then Keitel said something that got buried in the archives for decades, something so controversial it was kept classified. The words they tried to hide. During one interrogation session, Keitel was asked about Hitler's final orders. He laughed. Not a joyful laugh, a bitter, hollow sound. "You want to know his final orders?" Keitel said. "He ordered Germany to be destroyed." The interrogators thought he was exaggerating. But Keitel insisted. He described Hitler's Nero Decree, a real order from March 1945. Hitler commanded that all infrastructure be destroyed before the Allies could capture it. Bridges, factories, power plants, everything. If Germany can't win, Germany doesn't deserve to exist, Hitler had said. Keitel admitted that he and other officers had deliberately ignored these orders. They'd sabotaged Hitler's final commands to save what was left of Germany. "We betrayed him to save our country," Keitel confessed. "And we should have done it years earlier." Those words, "we should have done it years earlier," became the unspoken truth among captured German officers. But there was one final revelation that put everything in perspective: the legacy of silence. Here's what historians discovered decades later. After the war, Allied forces conducted thousands of interviews with German officers, secret interrogations, private conversations, recorded confessions. And a pattern emerged. Almost every high-ranking officer said the same thing. They'd known Hitler was leading them to destruction. They'd known it for years. But fear, pride, and the machinery of war kept them moving forward. Some claimed they were just following orders, a defense that was rejected at Nuremberg. Others admitted they'd been complicit, that they'd chosen personal survival over moral courage. But the most disturbing truth was this. These men weren't monsters. They were educated, intelligent, experienced military leaders, and they'd still followed a madman off a cliff. Their final words after Hitler's death weren't about ideology or loyalty. They were about regret, self-preservation, and the terrible weight of choices made too late. That's what German officers really said after Hitler died. The generals who watched the Führer's suicide, the Wehrmacht leaders facing German surrender. From the July 20 plot to April 1945, the Nazi leadership knew the truth. The German High Command's loyalty cracked. The German resistance finally spoke. Their last words revealed everything about the German military after Hitler's end. These Nazi officer statements changed how we understand World War II forever. The German army's reaction wasn't grief. It was relief.